Why did Rebecca sing Never Gonna Give You Up at the funeral? What did Dr. Sharon do for the first time in this episode? Is Roy and Keely's relationship on the rocks? We'll be discussing these questions and more in this video. Welcome to Square Eyes, a channel where we recap, review, and take a sideways look at your favourite TV shows. In this video, we'll be looking at episode 10 of season 2 of Ted Lasso, called No Weddings and a Funeral. Let's jump straight in. This episode starts with Sam and Rebecca in bed together, and some time must have passed since the Man City episode, as they're talking about how they've been sneaking around at work to hide their relationship. Sam suggests they let people know about their relationship, but Rebecca says she prefers the secrecy. I don't really believe her though. I think she just doesn't want all the negative press attention and hassle their relationship being public knowledge will bring. Next, Sam and Rebecca are in the kitchen in their underwear, and her mother walks in on them snogging. Rebecca says, "That's where my spare keys went," meaning her mother must have stolen a set of keys for herself the last time she was over, which is a pretty bold thing to do, even with your own daughter. Rebecca expects that her mother has walked out on her father again, as that was the last reason that she turned up at her house unannounced, but we find out that he's actually died this time. The players are gathered in the changing room, and Isaac tells the squad that they're going to the funeral as a team and they're expected to dress appropriately. This means ties, shirts, and no trainers. The players are not keen on the no trainers bit, as many don't even know how to buy dress shoes. Colin is worried that he'll have to queue up at midnight to get them, until Jamie explains that you don't need to do that for these shoes because nobody wants them. Then it's the day of the funeral, and Rebecca is staying in her childhood bedroom, which doesn't look like it's changed much since she was a child. Or at least you'd hope it hasn't, otherwise a middle-aged woman's choice of decor for a bedroom is a shirtless poster of David Hasselhoff, which would be a bit weird. Rebecca's woken up by her mother playing Never Gonna Give You Up at high volume. An argument about loud music quickly becomes about much deeper things, as Rebecca says she doesn't like the song anymore, and her mother says that once she loves something, she loves it forever. Like often happens with conversations between family members, this isn't really a discussion about Rick Astley, it's actually about her feelings about being left behind, and she's talking in metaphor. The mood is quickly lightened when Sassy climbs in through the balcony window. Her daughter Nora didn't manage the climb quite so well though. Roy and Keely are getting ready for the funeral, and Keely's talking about her plans to be buried in a biodegradable sack, so a decomposing body can be used to fertilise a fruit tree. Roy makes fun of this idea, not understanding that Keely is deadly serious. Ted's getting dressed to the tune of Easy Lover by Phil Collins and seems pretty happy, until his fingers start twitching and out of nowhere he gets overwhelmed by a panic attack. At the funeral, Rupert, Bex and their new baby have turned up. While on the surface it's because they want to pay their respects to Rebecca's father, it seems fairly likely he's just there to make Rebecca feel bad. Then the players arrive in the team bus. The whole squad has come and none of them are wearing trainers. Danny Rojas is really struggling in his formal shoes and looks like he's going to get some nasty blisters from the way he's hobbling around. It's worth noting how Jamie Tart is helping him though, as he continues to transition into a slightly nicer person. Dr. Sharon gets a call from Ted and he's clearly in the middle of a panic attack. She gives him some advice over the phone and then drops what she's doing and heads over to help him in person. Keely spots Rebecca looking at the attention Rupert is getting with his baby, so she tells him how awful the baby is. You don't often hear people say nasty things about babies, but in this moment it's just the right thing Rebecca needs to hear. And besides, that child has Rupert as its father, so it is probably going to end up being horrible by the time it grows up. Then Keely goes over to chat with Sassy, and she says that she suspects Rebecca has been conducting a secret relationship over the last few weeks. Sassy and Keely agree that they'll try and get Rebecca to tell them who her secret lover is, even though it's the day of her father's funeral. Roy walks into the church eating an apple, which is a joke at Keely's expense after she said she wanted her remains to help a fruit tree to grow. Roy and Keely are not on the same wavelength this episode, as Keely does not see the funny side of this at all. Dr. Sharon arrives at Ted's flat, and the first thing we see are things are quite messy, which I think we're shown to suggest Ted's not coping well at the moment, and he's not taking good care of himself. Then we see Ted, and he looks to be in poor shape. Sharon isn't phased though, and she sits down and starts talking to him. Rebecca and Keely are in the vestry, and are joined by Sassy, who has stolen a bottle of communion wine. Keely and Sassy tell Rebecca they think she has a secret love interest, and Rebecca admits to it straight away. Then her mother and Nora arrive too, and her mother says she knows who it is. Sassy asks a couple of very general questions, and Keely asks if it's Sam, and Rebecca's reaction confirms that it is. Hen party style screeching follows, which leads to the grumpy vicar asking for all but immediate family to leave the vestry. In Ted's apartment, he's opening up with Sharon about his feelings about his father's death. Ted didn't go to his father's funeral because he hated him for quitting. This also might explain why Ted has a philosophy of never quitting. It's something he's referred to several times in the series. At the church, Rebecca and her mother talk about her father, and Rebecca tells her about the day in 1991 when she caught her father cheating on her mother. It was the 13th of September. Then you cut to Ted talking to Dr. Sharon about the day he found his dad's body, which was the same day in 1991. Then there's a very cleverly cut sequence where both Rebecca's story about her dad's infidelity and Ted's story about discovering his dad's body after he died both flow into each other, with Ted sometimes finishing Rebecca's sentence and vice versa. Done badly, it would feel like making fun out of these tragic stories, but by splicing the two narratives together, it actually works well in lightening the mood, while still packing an emotional punch. To avoid jumping back and forth, I'll focus on Ted's story first, then come back to Rebecca. Ted came home after school and went to his room, and then heard a bang. When he opened the door, he found his father. Ted screamed, ran upstairs and called 911. Then he drank one of his dad's beers and called his mum and told her to come home. Rebecca's story is similar, but rather than a dead body, she and Sassy walked in on her father having sex with Mrs. Reynolds. Rebecca screamed and her father chased after her, begging her to stop. Then the next day her father said nothing at all about it. Rebecca's mother responds to the story by telling her that she always knew about his cheating. Rebecca responds by saying that she hates her for knowing about all this and still letting him do all that to her. Dr. Sharon tells Ted it's okay to be angry with his father still. Then she asks Ted to talk about the things he loved about his father. Then Ted tells a story about how his father stayed up late one night reading a book that Ted hadn't read for an English class, so he could then give Ted a synopsis in the car to school the next day. Ted's dad would have been a natural at recapping TV shows by the sounds of it, as he told Ted everything he needed to know about the book, and Ted got an A in the test. Ted finishes the story by saying his dad was a good dad, but he didn't think his dad knew that. He says to Sharon that if his father had known how good he was, then he might not have killed himself. Ted wishes that he had told his dad more often how good he was. He also resolved at that point to never let anyone else get by him, because they might be hurting inside. This story really explains the deeper reasons behind Ted's relentless positivity and his chirpy outlook. He wants to avoid anyone not feeling appreciated and doing what his father did. After pouring his heart out, Ted asks Dr. Sharon for a hug and she agrees, which might be a slight breach of professional boundaries, but she shows that there are some things that she won't compromise on when she tells Ted that he will be charged for the time that she spent on this visit. I think this is all done for laughs, but Dr. Sharon is doing her job here, and it's only right that she should be paid, particularly when she's dropped everything to be there for him. Rebecca and her mum talk about the differences between their two marriages, with Rebecca leaving Rupert and her mum standing by her dad. Her mother tells Rebecca that she thinks that she was brave for leaving Rupert, but Rebecca tells her how scary and horrible it was. But she also goes on to say that out of her loneliness, she's now started to find something wonderful. Then Rebecca's mum delivers some heavy emotional punches to Rebecca, saying that she was proud of her when she left Rupert because it showed that she knew she deserved better. She stuck by Rebecca's father because when she loves something, she loves it forever, just like she said about never gonna give you up earlier in the episode. Then she says that she's glad that Rebecca hates her, because she'd always thought that Rebecca didn't feel anything about her. And it's time for the funeral, and Rebecca is called up to give a eulogy for her father. She's already mentioned earlier that she hasn't prepared anything to say, and given the conversation she's just had with her mum, it's unlikely she's going to have many nice things to say about him at this point. Before she has a chance to start, Ted walks in and sits down at the back, just in time to provide Rebecca with a salute of encouragement. Then Rebecca tries to give a speech, but the words don't come to her, so instead she starts to falteringly sing the words to Never Gonna Give You Up. When Rebecca can't bring herself to sing goodbye, Ted starts singing from the back, and then before long the whole church is singing along. It's a strange but also strangely touching scene, and Rebecca's mother is smiling at the end of it, which shows that some of the damage done by their conversation earlier has been a little bit repaired by the sing-along. On the way out of the church, Rupert is his usual loathsome self, but he mentions that he's convinced Bex to give Rebecca her shares in Richmond, saying he doesn't have time for football. Then he goes and whispers something in Nate's ear as he's leaving. He's up to something, but it's not yet clear what. At the wake, Rebecca tells Keely and Sassia that she's thinking of calling it off with Sam. She's not able to articulate exactly why, but it may be something to do with the age gap and the potential press issues if their relationship becomes public knowledge. Then Danny Rojas thanks Rebecca for lending him a pair of her pink fluffy slippers, and we get a close-up of his manky feet, which is enough to put anyone off their funeral tea. Wisely, Rebecca tells Danny he can keep her slippers. Then Jamie talks to Keely and confesses to her that he's still in love with her and wants to get back together with her. Keely doesn't seem horrified by this confession either. She just stares at him as he professes his love and then he walks away. She looks visibly rattled when Roy creeps up on her, like she's been caught doing something she shouldn't, but Roy's oblivious to the conversation that just took place. He apologises to Keely for his behaviour earlier in the day and explains that death makes him uncomfortable because he's got a lot of mixed up feelings following his granddad's death. Roy professes his love to Keely too, and she gives him a big cuddle. He's lucky he didn't make another apple joke, or she might have ended up going home with Jamie. Sam then pulls Rebecca into a cupboard to give her a cuddle, but unfortunately for him, this gives Rebecca a chance to dump him. She lets him down gently and explains that she's not able to be in a relationship with someone so wonderful, because he could really hurt her. She's afraid of making herself so vulnerable by the sounds of it. Sam says he understands, which is bold of him, because I don't think her explanation of "you're too brilliant" would make a lot of sense to many people, but he accepts that it's over for now and tells her to take as long as she needs. As the funeral ends, the players make their way back on the team bus, but it's worth noting that Ted and Sassia leave together on foot. The episode ends with Rebecca and her mum on the bed together, looking through her childhood photos. They stumble across a video which I think will be a home video from 1979, but when they go to play it, the video's been recorded over by the music video for Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. This episode dealt with a lot of heavy emotional topics, but because it's Ted Lasso, it did it in a way that still found the humour and hopefulness in these moments. Not to mention the fact that it gave the actors a chance to show the range of their talents, with Jason Sudeikis and Hannah Waddingham both particularly excellent in this episode. This wasn't always easy to watch, but it was compelling and brilliantly done. The scenes between Rebecca and her mother were particularly heart-wrenching. We've all seen storylines about fathers whose affairs have been discovered by their children, so there was nothing unique about this, but the execution was just brilliant. The scene where Rebecca sings Never Gonna Give You Up was also great too. I spent quite a long time wondering why she sang the song, and have several theories. Firstly, I think her Rickroll in the funeral is the most literal interpretation of what's happening. For those who've had their heads in a bucket for the last 20 years, rickrolling is where you trick someone into clicking a link to Rick Astley's famous song. In this case, she's expected to give a heartfelt speech about how much she loved her father, but in that moment she doesn't, so instead she sings the song instead. I think there are other reasons for her singing that song though, and it's not just mischief. The lyrics are all about not giving up on someone, and that's the exact theme of the argument Rebecca had with her mother just moments before. Once I love something, I love it forever. Rebecca's mum's reason for staying with her father is basically another way of saying I'm never going to give you up, so perhaps Rebecca saw the song as symbolising the relationship that her parents had. The words could also have another meaning too, as Rebecca was looking directly at her mother as she sung, so maybe her song was her way of telling her mother that she will be there for her, which was a gesture she needed to make after telling her mum that she hated her a few minutes earlier. Not to mention that the song is her mother's favourite, so it's also a nice gesture to sing something that makes her happy. The other potential meaning of Rebecca singing Never Gonna Give You Up could be even sillier, and the creators of the show were just rickrolling us, the audience, with a moment that people like me were meant to overthink endlessly, but really it was just a sing-song in a church. That's exactly what you're supposed to do with a rickroll. Set an expectation that something is going to happen, and then, instead, deliver a Astley song. I think it was a brave choice to choose this episode to have Ted's big emotional pour out with Dr. Sharon, as it was already very sad with the funeral stuff. I suppose it's a bit like doing all your laundry in one day to get it out of the way. It's hard work, but at least it's done by the end of it. Ted and Sharon really get into the details of Ted's father's death, and the day Ted found the body is clearly a fundamental part of why Ted is the way he is. It's bittersweet to think that the thing that makes Ted the relentlessly positive character he is on the outside is actually the darkest and least happy part of his personal history. But the fact his father died without knowing how much Ted appreciated him has sent him on a lifelong mission to make sure everyone else he ever meets knows that Ted appreciates them. I absolutely love the way that this show can wring emotions out of humour, and then find humour in those emotions too. So the scene where Ted and Rebecca are telling the stories of discovering their fathers on the same day in 1991 is a great moment of both comedy and tragedy, and it's impeccably acted, written, and edited together. It feels like it shouldn't work, but it does, and it's one of my favourite scenes of the season so far. Rebecca calling it off with Sam feels like a fairly big plot point in the season, but it didn't get a lot of attention in this episode. I've mentioned in an earlier video that their relationship seems doomed to not have a long-term future, so it seemed likely to happen at some point, but this breakup seemed much earlier than expected. However, the way Rebecca broke it off with Sam did leave loads of room for them to get back together in the future. Another relationship that seemed to be in trouble was Keely and Roy's, with them being completely at odds with each other in this episode. Roy's no-nonsense approach to death and spirituality was explained late in the episode by how he was still processing his grandfather's death, but Keely clearly didn't like his mockery of her thoughts about death and dying, and her response to Jamie's declaration of love made me think that perhaps things might be a bit rocky in their relationship, particularly when you pair that with the way she responded to him when he turned up at the church in his suit. She masked it by complimenting the other players, but it was clear that her eyes lit up when she saw him. She looked at him in the way that I look at a buffet in an Indian restaurant where I've not eaten all day. Rupert's appearance in this episode was interesting too. He was as awful as ever, so his decision to give Beck's shares in the club back to Rebecca seems oddly generous. And I don't mean that in a nice way. I mean he must be up to something, and judging by the whispering he was doing in Nate's ears, it may involve him too. My favourite line in this episode came from Sassy when she said, "Rupert, I think about your death every single day. I can't wait. I'm going to wear red to your funeral. I'll be a beacon of joy to the other 3 people there." I get the feeling she probably hated Rupert a long time before the divorce, but had to bite her tongue when Rebecca was still married to him. So now there's no reason to hold back. She really lets rip and it's delightful. Rupert usually likes to have the last word in any interaction, but I think he was too taken aback by the nastiness and visceral imagery of what Sassy said and had nothing to say in response. This is the second time that Rebecca's mother has turned up in her kitchen to find a new love interest for Rebecca's in a state of undress. Last time it was in the Signal episode, with Luca from the Tumescent app, who was naked in the kitchen. Beard mentions that the human body is 21.3 grams lighter after it dies. This theory is based upon research done by Dr. Duncan McDougall in the early 1900s. His methods were seriously flawed, so he wasn't able to accurately measure the weight of the bodies properly enough to draw the conclusions that he did, so sadly Beard is wrong. However, there is a film called 21 Grams which uses the same premise. Early in the episode, we see Ted getting dressed to Phil Collins' Easy Lover, which is a callback to the Rainbow episode, when he said, "I think a fella should only take as long as the tune Easy Lover by Phil Collins and Philip Bailey to get dressed in the morning." Sadly, he didn't stick to this because he had a panic attack in the middle and wasn't fully dressed by the end of the song. Just before Ted had his panic attack, he tries to conjure up happy memories to stop the attack. We see 3 quick flashes of images, which include one of his little green army men making a bus with his son Henry, and the moment he scored the bullseye when he beat Rupert at darts. When Dr. Sharon picks up her phone to Ted, she says, "Morning, Ted." It's the first time that she's used his first name to greet him, rather than calling him Coach Lasso, showing that they're finally becoming friends. Nate is wearing the suit that Ted bought him in the For the Children episode, when they went to the gala dinner in Season 1. Jan Mass suggests that this must be infantilizing for him to have his clothes bought for him by another man, and Nate counters that his mother also buys his clothes, which hardly stops him from sounding like a child. With just 2 episodes left in the season, things are getting close to a conclusion for this season's storylines. Rebecca's relationship with Sam is off for now, but there are 2 episodes left for something more to happen, so I suspect we've not heard the end of that. Ted seems to have expressed a lot of the deep-seated feelings he's been holding on to about his father's death to Dr. Sharon in this episode. It's never as simple as talking about things providing a magic solution, but now he's not bottling up those feelings, it's possible there might start to be some improvements in mental health and he might start to feel a bit better. I'm less optimistic about Roy and Keely's relationship. I feel like we've been given a few little nods towards things not working out so well with them in the last few episodes. With Jamie waiting in the wings if things go wrong, it seems like things are going to get a bit tricky for them. I'm a bit sad about this development, as I like the fact that they just seem like a couple that got on well and dealt with their problems maturely and respectfully. I hope they work through this tricky patch too, but there are signs of friction, which in a typical sitcom would spell doom for a relationship. But maybe there's another direction the storyline's been taken, because in Ted Lasso they tend to do things a slightly smarter way. And the thing at the end with Rupert and Nate seemed really weird. Why did he whisper in his ear? What would those two have to talk about? We've seen Nate take a darker turn lately. Could he be spying for Rupert maybe? I can't really see why that would be useful to him though. I guess we'll have to wait and find out. Thank you for watching my recap and review of episode 10 of season 2 of Ted Lasso. I'll be back with my review of episode 11 in a couple of days. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss out. Goodbye.